I'm Politico's Capitol Bureau Chief, and I'm happy to be with you today to talk about tax policy. It was actually the first beat I covered at Politico way back in 2008. I forgot a lot of the details, and I'm brushing up on them for this year. You just heard from Senator Ron Johnson about how Republicans are using this movement to sort of prepare this big tax bill. Now we're going to continue the conversation on the House side with Congressman Mike Lawler, who has been very active in these talks given his interest in the state and local tax deduction, or SALT. And we're going to start there, Congressman, because this is like your issue. This is your baby. You have been adamant that any tax bill in Congress that passes has to raise the SALT cap from its current $10,000 limit. You have recently introduced the SALT Fairness in Marriage Penalty Elimination Act, which proposes a $100,000 cap for singles and a $200,000 cap for couples. Let's just start with, why is this important to you and your constituents?
Well, you look at states like New York and California, New Jersey, they're high tax states. They tend to spend a lot. Governor Hochul yesterday proposing a $252 billion budget, up $100 billion over the last decade. So obviously in these higher taxed, high spending states, it is a challenge for the average person. I represent Rockland and Westchester counties, along with Putnam and Dutchess counties, but Rockland and Westchester are the top two highest property tax counties in America. It's home to the Clintons and George Soros over in Westchester County. So affluent, relatively wealthy, though blue-collar working class in many parts. And we run right up against that cap just on our school taxes alone. I can tell you, I live in a 2,000 square foot home on a quarter acre of land, and I pay over $15,000 in property taxes right off the gate before you even get to state income taxes. So the $10,000 cap really had a negative impact on states like New York. We've seen a mass exodus, in large part because of the cost of living. Putting the $10,000 cap on SALT had a significant impact. So this is something for me about fairness. It is an issue of double taxation. The reality of the SALT debate, 7 years ago was very simple. It was a pay for. It was a pay for other provisions of the tax bill. It was not some holy grail that Republicans were advocating for decades. As they worked through different components of the tax bill, they doubled the standard deduction, they reduced the alternative minimum tax, and this is where they landed on. I've been very clear since running for elected office, first in the New York State Assembly and now in Congress, that the cap on SALT needs to be lifted. I will never support a tax bill that does not lift the cap on SALT. And here's the reality of the negotiations. If we do nothing, the cap on SALT expires. If we don't pass a tax bill, unlimited SALT comes back. The problem is that it would be associated with the largest tax increase in American history. The alternative minimum tax would come back in spades, which would have a negative impact on New York and California and New Jersey, among others. So it's incumbent on everybody to negotiate in good faith here, which is why I've introduced the legislation that I did to lift the cap to $100,000 for individuals and $200,000 for those filing jointly. As a member of the SALT caucus, we've also introduced a bill that would bring back SALT unlimited. This is a negotiation, and we're going to have to work through it as a conference. This will be done through reconciliation. And ultimately, as the president said, we're going to have one big, beautiful bill. And that's what we're going to have to do to get all of the key provisions of reconciliation through, inclusive of tax.
You definitely have a lot of leverage right now, as do most Republicans, given the slim majority. So you had already mentioned, I was going to actually go next to the fact that your own party is the reason we have this $10,000 cap on SALT. How are you persuading your colleagues to take this seriously? Do you think it's just because you have the leverage, or are you finding yourself explaining to them the situations of your constituents, in these private meetings? And by the way, Donald Trump won a lot of these districts, or got a lot of support, grew his support in them too. How are you persuading Republicans?
Well, first of all, the president's support for this has been critical. He said during the campaign that we need to lift the cap on salt. We met with him a little over a week ago down at Mar-a-Lago, the members from New York, New Jersey, California, and discussed the issue of salt. He reaffirmed his support for lifting the cap as part of the tax deal, and said, look, if we can get unlimited, great, but come back with a number and let's get this done. So he's in full agreement with us, which is extremely helpful, obviously, when dealing with some of my colleagues who, reflexively are opposed because they think they're subsidizing bad blue state policies. The reality is New York is a donor state. We send more money to the federal government than we get back. There are red states, in fact, that get more money from the federal government than revenue they send. So the reality is everybody could sit and play the game of who's subsidizing who. To me, this is an issue of fairness. It's an issue of double taxation. My constituents, New Yorkers, should not be penalized because of the disastrous policies of Kathy Hochul and one-party rule up in Albany. Yes, we agree. We need to change that. And that's something that, obviously the voters are going to have a big say in. But when it comes to the decision-making here, there are a few aspects to this. One, yes, we do have leverage because, as I said, if we do nothing, if we pass no bill, salt comes back unlimited.
Right.
So for those that are opposed to salt coming back unlimited, the impetus is on them to negotiate with us. So this is something where I think we're not going to convince each other of who's right, who's wrong on the substance of it. But I do think most of my colleagues recognize they need to do something on salt as part of this negotiation if we are going to get a final bill. And again, the president reiterating his support, I think, is vital here. And that's something that ultimately will help get this across the finish line.
I'm going to come back to President Trump in a few minutes, but just since you mentioned him being helpful in persuading some of your skeptical colleagues, let's just say, did you, run back to D.C. after you met with him and say, look, Donald Trump told us this in that meeting? Or has he talked to, some people who are opponents of raising the cap? How much of an advocate has he been?
No, the president's been great on this. He had a meeting with the chairs of all the committees subsequently after our meeting and reiterated to all of them the need to lift the cap as part of the reconciliation bill. I know he's talked to a number of members based on feedback we've gotten that he has reaffirmed his support for that. So again, I think that is critical. The president won overwhelmingly across the country in districts represented by Republicans. I'm one of only 3 Harris districts in the whole conference. Me, Brian Fitzpatrick, and Don Bacon are the only 3 Republican members of the House that won in districts Kamala Harris won. So, the president is obviously both the leader of the party, but, I think will really help guide many of the members as to where he wants to land on this bill. Ultimately, we have a very good relationship with our leadership, but also Jason Smith, the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. We have been talking about this issue to our colleagues for over 2 years. This didn't just come up in the last week or 2. This is something that we have consistently been working over for the entirety of my time here in Congress, so that they do understand how impactful and important this is to our districts and to our states.
You bring up working with the committee. So one of your skeptics on this in the past has been Ways and Means Chairman Jason Smith. He, from my understanding, ignored your guys' pleas last year to raise the cap on salt as part of this bipartisan tax bill he wrote with Democrats, which died in the Senate. What do you think the consequences of that were politically, and would you say that Smith has changed his tune on this?
Look, Jason did sit down with us numerous times last Congress, and obviously there was a difference of opinion on the final bill.
His district is very different than yours.
Yeah,
one of the most
absolutely.
low-income districts in the country.
Yep.
SALT clearly does not apply.
Every member has to vote their conscience. They have to vote their district. They have to represent the views of their constituents. My point has always been, when you look at our small majority, it is New York, New Jersey, California that has delivered the majority. Over 2 cycles prior to this one, we picked up 10 seats in New York and California alone. That is what gave us the majority in the 118th Congress. Maintaining my seat, among others, is what kept us the majority in this 119th Congress. And so making sure that we have a tax bill that is reflective of the entirety of the conference is critical. And Jason understands that. Jason has been working tirelessly in this Congress to help us on this particular issue. He has become a SALT acolyte, if you will, and I know he has been talking extensively to the president, to the Senate, to others about it. But look, Jason gets the politics of this.
Yeah.
We need 218 votes to pass the bill, and he understands that SALT has to be part of the equation. At the end of the day, there are no Pyrrhic victories in politics, folks. It's 50+1. You either get the votes or you don't. And if you don't, you can't do anything. So Jason understands that, leadership understands that, the president understands that, and I think we will get a tax bill that addresses the issue of SALT among many other provisions, because the fact is, putting the cap on SALT aside, the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was very beneficial to the country. Revenue is at an all-time high, despite all the projections and prognostications by CBO and the press and the Democrats. Revenue is at an all-time high under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. So we have to address many provisions within the bill, inclusive of SALT, but we need a tax package that really addresses the issue of affordability across the country, addresses the issue of our business climate, and really allows for economic growth, which at the end of the day is vital for government to be able to provide all the other services that it does.
So I want to go back to that meeting between you and your fellow SALT caucus members and Donald Trump. And my understanding is you're meeting with him again today. Is that correct?
I will be.
Okay. So first of all, let's talk about the one a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
Did you guys go in with a specific proposal on how high you want to release the cap? And did he indicate, even though he is showing clear, sympathies to this and that he wants to get something done, do we have any sense of, what that looks like? Yep. Did he indicate?
So we did raise the 100-200 number, but again, this is ultimately a negotiation. And everybody's going to have a little bit of a give and take as we work through the numbers, because there's key provisions within the tax bill that could have a negative impact, right? So if the alternative minimum tax came back, for instance, that would be problematic for states like New York. That would have a very negative impact and basically offset what we're doing here with SALT. So you have to work through this in terms of the numbers. The president's point to us was, look, I'm with you. I support you on this. I agree this has had a negative impact on New York, and we should address it. Look, at the end of the day, he's a New Yorker at heart, and no matter the fact that he now lives in Florida, born and raised in New York, he cares about New York. He wants to make sure that the city returns to its glory, frankly. I mean, under Democratic rule in the city over the last decade, it's become a disaster there. And so he cares deeply about it, and said to us, look, go back, come up with a number that works.
You got to do the accent, though. Yeah.
You know, Mike, go get a number, come back. Okay. Look, the president understands that we got to get this done. So we are working with Ways and Means to get the relevant information that we need to work through the numbers. And again, this is but one part of the tax bill. If you look at a district like mine, prior to the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, 50% of households itemized their deductions in my district. After the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, it went down to about 19% of households itemizing their deductions. Why? Because the standard deduction was doubled. So most people fell under the standard deduction and were covered. So the question is how to address this in a very serious and meaningful way. When Democrats are saying, unlimited or bust, the reality is you're talking about the ultra wealthy that unlimited would cover.
And that's expensive too, right? Up to
it's very
$1 trillion
expensive. It's $1 trillion over 10 years. And again, you go down that road, the alternative minimum tax would likely come back. So you have to weigh all of this as part of a tax negotiation, and that's what we're doing.
And is today's meeting with the president, is this also about SALT, or is this more just sort of a...
No, this is a general meeting.
And what is your relationship like with the president? Obviously it matters because, a lot of people are going to be pleading their cases to the president when it comes to deductions or credits or, how they want to pay for something or offset it. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with Trump.
Look, I think it is important to have a relationship with the President of the United States. It's why, as a member of the House last Congress, when Joe Biden came to my district, I showed up and had, a very cordial relationship. And I think that's important for you to do your job as a representative. I've met the president now numerous times over the last year plus. I think, obviously, we're continuing to build a rapport, but I think that's important, and it's why you saw Eric Adams come down to, the inauguration. If you take the position, regardless of party affiliation, that you're not going to speak to the president, it's foolish. Mm-hmm. It's foolish, and it gets you nowhere.
Well, you've gone...
So for me, I have always been very clear. If I disagree about something, I will say that. But I think it's important, as we're working through these issues, to work with the administration, work with the president, and have a positive working relationship. And so that's something that, we're in the process of building.
You recently sponsored the Make Greenland Great Again Act and Dusty Johnson's Panama Canal Repurchase Act. Seems like probably a good strategy to butter Trump up, too. I'm just going to leave that there.
And the renaming of the Gulf of America.
Okay. Look, all the sweet spots for Donald Trump, right?
But I will say, oftentimes people will snicker or laugh at something that he says or how he says it, but the reality is what he's talking about is very significant. The Panama Canal is a critical waterway for trade for the United States. It's also a critical waterway for our national security interests. When you see what China is doing around the globe with respect to economic coercion, when you see what they're doing taking control of ports and waterways, when you see what they're doing with respect to Taiwan and encircling Taiwan, it is a major threat to international trade and our national security interests. If they created a blockade in the Strait of Taiwan, for instance, that would have a devastating impact on our economy. 60% of international trade flows through the Strait of Taiwan. If they were to, under their control of the Panama Canal, block off U.S. access in some form or fashion, that would be devastating. So what he's talking about is very significant. It's very serious. You look at Greenland, you look at rare earth minerals, you look at missile defense, the threats posed by Russia and China. That is significant as well. So look, to me, the idea that the United States would purchase land or reassume control of something that we built, I don't think is wrong at all. I think we've obviously purchased land in the past. That's not new. So the president is raising very serious points. The Gulf of America just sounds great.
So I want to go back to tax. What is a win for you in this area? I mean, we've got about 10 minutes now on the clock in our conversation. I know you're going to say something like, I don't negotiate in the press, but just give us a range. Like, what's ideal? Obviously, your ideal is what you just introduced, right? 100,000 for singles, 200,000 for married couples. But what is actually possible in this, given the cost we're associating with these changes?
I don't negotiate in the press.
Okay, here, wait, let me just say, you did recently suggest on Fox News that a $60,000 cap for individual filers could cover most constituents. Tell us about that. Maybe that is the sweet spot.
So, look, I've introduced legislation that would raise it to 100 for individuals, 200,000 for married couples. I think that obviously, to me, is ideal. It would cover nearly everybody, certainly in my district and other districts like mine where taxes are very, very high. But ultimately, this is going to be driven by the numbers. And the 60,000 reference was to the fact that if you look for many districts, that would cover, almost everybody within the district. Districts like mine, it's higher. So you just have to work through the numbers and the cost in totality of the whole tax package. And that's what we're going to do. And I think the objective to me is to negotiate in good faith, to work with the president, to work with my colleagues in leadership, to get this where it needs to be, to get a tax bill passed, to get a reconciliation bill passed that includes border security, that includes increased production of energy, that addresses our debt and spending. We have significant challenges that Donald Trump has inherited from President Biden and Vice President Harris, and we have one opportunity to address it through reconciliation. And so it is going to be critical that we work through this. And that's why I've said very clearly, if SALT is not addressed in this bill, then I cannot support it. But if, as we work through the numbers, we can come to a fair agreement, that's fine. We're all going to have to give a little bit. Everybody's not going to get everything they want as part of a negotiation. Anybody who's ever been married understands that. But that's a reality of life. And so it's something that we're going to have to work through.
It sounds like you have sort of, I don't want to say drawn a red line because well, your red line is you have to do something, right? But I was told that last year, the SALT guys, yourself included, pushed for a bill that would have allowed joint filers to deduct about $20,000. But my understanding now is that is not enough for you. You would say no to something like that.
The very first bill I introduced was to raise the cap from 10 to 20. Mm-hmm. And the reason I did that was because, A, we were in a divided government. B, the tax bill had not expired. It's expiring at the end of this year. And so
and see, hello, leverage now. Yeah.
Well, that's the reality, right? Yeah. We knew we would have more leverage in a negotiation in 2025 than we did prior to that.
Sure.
But I felt it was critically important to address the issue of SALT and be reasonable about it and understand that, for a 1-year or 3-year provision, we could lift the cap for married couples, eliminate the marriage penalty. So that's what I had introduced, because to me, again, you can throw out there your hopes and your dreams, or you can be realistic about a negotiation and offer a constructive solution. I do believe, had we done that, had we passed my bill, members like Michelle Steele and Michael Garcia and Anthony D'Esposito and John Duarte and Mark Molinaro would have won, because this issue is that potent in states like New York and California. So to me, it's understanding the policy as well as the politics, And obviously, in a midterm election, this issue is going to matter in states like New York and California, and Democrats know that, and that's why they're already on the offensive about this, trying to attack us, saying unlimited or bust, anything less than full repeal is failure. No. The reality here is that when Democrats had complete control of Washington under Joe Biden, when Chuck Schumer, the Senate Majority Leader from New York at the time, they got zero. They didn't lift the cap. They didn't get a full repeal. So we are going to deliver on this in this Congress, and for me, this is my top priority, and I'm going to make sure that it gets done.
It's interesting you mentioned elections, because I've had conversations with some pretty senior Republicans who are privately sort of acknowledging that it's unlikely that Republicans keep the House, just because if you look at historically, presidents, they typically lose control.
It was also unlikely.
The first midterms.
It was also unlikely that Donald Trump would win a second term. The reality is.
But wait, very quickly. My question though is, obviously you object to that way of thinking, because if they do assume the House is gone, then they're not going to be, giving you as much as you potentially would on SELT.
Look, for Donald Trump to be successful over the next 4 years, he needs to keep the House. And the House is obviously going to be won through New York and California. That is where there is the most opportunity for flips and the most potential for losses. And so, this issue is paramount to the members in those districts. I do not subscribe to the idea that we are guaranteed to lose in the midterms. Yes, the historic trends are what they are, but this is truly a unique time in American history. And I think Donald Trump obviously had a very historic win in November. Won every swing state, won the popular vote, first Republican to do that as a challenger, in a very, very long time. But this is something where I think if we deliver on the promises that we made on border security, on stopping the massive influx of illegal immigrants, on deporting criminal aliens, if we bring about peace and stability around the globe, if we are to really address the trade imbalance with countries like China, if we are to bring advanced manufacturing back to the United States, if we are to get record levels of employment, if we pass a tax bill that not only produces record revenue, but really a lot of economic growth and prosperity, and if we right-size the federal government and start to make it more efficient for the American people, then I think we are poised to actually not only keep the House, but grow the majority and grow our majority in the Senate. Because I think the American people are so fed up with the lack of results, and we've seen the pendulum swing back and forth, back and forth. But I think it was very telling in a state like New York, where you saw Donald Trump make more gains in New York than any other state in the country. And yes, Joe Biden still, or Kamala Harris still won by about 1 million votes in New York. But the reality is you saw movement in parts of New York City, the Latino community, the Asian community, the Orthodox Jewish community, the Russian and Eastern European communities, among black voters, among young voters, that movement is significant because people are looking for results. So I think the idea that automatically we're going to lose the House is very short-sighted. And I would just end on this point. Yes, in the last Congress, we had difficulties along the way and some infighting and difficulties moving legislation. at the end of the day, we have unified government for only the 4th time since World War II for Republicans. Republicans have one opportunity to get this right. And it means everybody's going to have to give. Everybody's going to have to eat some things that they don't like. But it's a reality of governing, and it's a reality of the responsibility that the American people gave us. And so I'm committed to doing what needs to be done, fighting for my district, fighting for my constituents, fighting for my state along the way, but to work towards compromises that actually get legislation signed into law. As I said before, there's no Pyrrhic victories in politics. It's 50 plus 1.
So I'm going to end on something that has nothing to do with taxes. The GOP rumor mill is that you're going to be the next governor of the great state of New York. Maybe hopeful, wishful thinking. Where are you in deciding whether you're going to run or not?
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Look, it's no secret that I'm looking at it. I think New Yorkers are desperate for new leadership. Governor Pataki was the last Republican governor. He was last elected the year after 9/11. So, Democrats have had control of the governor's mansion going on 20 years, starting with Eliot Spitzer, then Andrew Cuomo, or David Patterson in between, Andrew Cuomo, Kathy Hochul now. And they've had one-party control in Albany since 2019. New York leads the nation in out-migration. We have the highest tax burden, the worst business climate. Crime has skyrocketed. You look at energy costs, utility costs are through the roof under the CLCPA. The MTA, the worst run authority in America, bar none, carries debt greater than 80% of the states in the country. Let me repeat that. The MTA carries debt greater than 80% of the states in the country. That is unsustainable. And she just proposed a $252 billion budget, up $100 billion since she took statewide office as lieutenant governor. You cannot sustain this when you're bleeding and hemorrhaging out talent, people, and your tax base. So to me, this is something I will look at. I am a New Yorker. I care deeply about our state. I'm tired of seeing people move to Florida and North Carolina and South Carolina, great states. But it is not good for the country if New York collapses. It is not good for the economy if New York collapses. So it is going to be critically important in 2026 for 2 reasons. Number 1, offer New Yorkers a real choice. And number 2, have a strong ticket to make sure that we flip these seats in the House that we just lost and keep the House majority. And the only way to do that is if you really make the case to New Yorkers. So I won't decide for some time. I actually really love the job that I'm doing. This has really been the honor of a lifetime to serve in Congress. I just was chosen as chair of the Middle East Subcommittee. I've done a lot of work on strengthening our relationship with Israel, taking on Iran and the illicit oil trade between Iran and China. There is a lot of work to do in this Congress and to make sure that we address the challenges facing the American people. But it's a choice I'm going to have to make in the coming months because the lack of leadership in New York under Kathy Hochul has had devastating consequences. She truly is the most inept, feckless governor in America.
He's a big fan, as you can
big
tell.
Big fan. And something's got to give. So we'll see.
Congressman, thank you for joining us today. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.